So the economic news for Donald Trump is a wall of negative data. This is the biggest April drop in the Dow Jones since the Great Depression, nearly 100 years ago. The S&P 500 has experienced a drop of 14% since Trump became president. That is the biggest drop in the first 3 months of her presidency in history. And that's not all. The IMF this week declared that they are downgrading their global economic forecast. They believe that economic growth will be substantially less around the world than they had originally forecast, due to what they say is the major negative shock of Trump's tariff policy. And there's more still.
And investors are obviously spooked. The bond market is down and the dollar is doing worse than it has in years. Look at this Wall Street Journal headline. It put the stock market's recent drop in context. The Dow headed for worst April since 1932 as investors send no confidence signal.
You know, sometimes we look at the day-to-day and I feel like we can get lost. So let's take a look over the whole stretch of the Trump presidency as we approach day 100. The S&P has dropped the most under Trump for any president at this point in their presidency since the S&P 500 was in fact created back in 1957. And indeed, it is not anywhere close, folks. Chance of a recession. You see, I have 4 different little metrics we can look at. JP Morgan, 60%. Polymarket, 57%. Reuters, 45%. Goldman Sachs, 45%. That's a bunch of numbers on your screen, but they're all basically telling the same exact story. That is, on either side of 50%, there's basically a 50-50 chance of a recession at this point. And that is way up from where we were at the beginning of the Trump presidency, when the numbers simply put weren't anywhere near this.
Now, amid all of this, if you talk to people who are supporters of Trump, as I actually did at the weekend, a friend of mine, doctor, supports Trump, this is something they often say. What they say is, well, he's actually engaging in a painful process to reshape the US and the global economy, and it will come out stronger as a result. So it's some pain now in order for gain later. Another way of putting it is this: a process of creative destruction. They're deliberately involved in some destruction in order to create something better that comes from this. Now, this process of creative destruction is well known and described. It starts from our understanding of nature. I mean, we will prune trees in order to help them grow. Firefighters might spread controlled fires in order to prevent large forest fires becoming out of control. The concept of destruction in order to facilitate creation is well known, and it's sometimes described in economics too. Beyond economics is described in government as a whole, and this same argument is also used to the destruction that Trump is bringing about in government. They're sacking thousands of people, eliminating services, abolishing departments, and again, the defenders of Trump will sometimes argue this on the basis of, well, it's a process of creative destruction. Now let's put this under the microscope for a second. Creative destruction involves a strategic destruction. It involves very controlled, measured, focused areas of destruction in order to allow the areas around it to thrive in future. It is never indiscriminate. I mean, another example is sometimes a bit closer to my own field in healthcare. Dentists might occasionally remove teeth in order to allow the teeth around it to grow more healthily. But as I say, creative destruction always involves targeted acts of destruction in order to allow the whole area to thrive in future. Surgeons are engaged in this kind of thing all the time. But that is certainly not what Trump is doing. Just look what he did with his tariffs policy and look at why the markets have reacted the way that they have. He hasn't strategically and surgically implemented some specific tariffs on particular sectors in China that he wants to change the dynamic with, and he wants to reset the table with. No, he's issued blanket tariffs against China for all of their exports, but in addition, he's also issued blanket tariffs to the entire world. There's nothing strategic and deliberate about that. And furthermore, he's not engaging in any process of rebuilding the American manufacturing base. As I've mentioned in a previous video, the Chinese actually spend a lot of thought, money, and energy on building their manufacturing base. The state makes factories that private sector can then use to experiment with, and dozens of them might fail, and the state is fine with that so long as one winner comes out in the end. The US government has never been involved in that, and certainly not the Trump administration. Some things the US government did do was to really engage in investing in infrastructure, like the Biden administration did, in a huge way. The Inflation Reduction Act was all about that. And Trump isn't doing any of that either. So there's nothing creative about this destructive impulse. It's purely that. It's destructive and it's an impulse. It's a way of satisfying Trump's grievance-based mentality, as I've also mentioned in a previous video. It's not really a strategic act to rebuild anything. And that exactly applies with his approach to the government as a whole. They're destroying things in a mad rampage, and there's no plan to replace those functions with anything. It would be one thing if you tried to replace those functions in the private sector. So for example, in the 80s in the UK, Margaret Thatcher did, to a large extent, decimate a lot of the public sector. But she did it in a strategic way because she created a market system that then allowed those same functions to be taken on by the private sector. She privatized things. She got private companies to take on those functions. Now, people can argue as to whether or not that was a good or bad idea. Prices went up for a lot of things that were extremely cheap at the time because we also had to pay for the profit margins of the private sector, whether it's with water or energy or a whole range of things. But at least there was a creative dimension to that because she had a vision in terms of the economy that she wanted to create. The vision of Trump seems to go no further than the destruction itself. The destruction is the end in itself. In fact, as I've also mentioned before, there's a deliberate policy to bring about economic and political destruction to a catastrophic level called accelerationism that a lot of the billionaire oligarchs behind Trump have been plotting for some time now. The destruction for them is an end in itself. You see, because they have bunkers they'll all go into when everything completely collapses and society falls apart. And they're hoping to come out a bit like the survival of the fittest, into a new era, a new dawn, with a lot less people who they don't like. So is there a method to Trump's madness? Is there an actual deliberate idea that he's actually going to improve everybody's life through a little bit of pain right now? Is the argument that the MAGA world and all of their supporters and enablers can credibly stand up, that this is actually a stepping stone towards something better for everyone, that we just have to hold the line until people's livelihoods improve and those who are disadvantaged experience a renaissance? No, there is absolutely no evidence of that being attempted. There's no evidence in the way that the destruction is being wrought in a completely uncontrolled way, and there's no evidence of any plans down the line to create a new, more positive, productive, effective economy and system of government. So no, Trump isn't playing 3D chess. No, Trump doesn't really have a master plan that we're unaware of. It's destruction for the sake of destruction. Thank you for watching my video. I'm a psychiatrist. I'm also interested in philosophy and public policy and politics. I aim to make a number of videos about these subjects and particularly the intersection between them. If you're able to like and subscribe to this channel, then it'll really help, and also put in some comments whenever you can. That'll really help the algorithm. It'll really help promote this channel to other people. Now, beyond that, we are all, unfortunately, at the behest of a very small number of people who seem to run everything these days. And we are all at the whim of a tech oligarch who could decide tomorrow to end a channel like this because it's not in their favor. And because of that, I've set up a kind of email newsletter, which you can subscribe to. At the top of the channel, you'll see a web address. Please go there and subscribe to my newsletter. That way you can stay in touch with the videos I'm making. At least we can keep the content flowing. So I hope you can do that. And I hope we can keep talking and also gain clarity, not just about what's happening right now, but how we can get through this, how we can improve things to make a better tomorrow together. Thank you.